Ladies and gentlemen, and I want you to enjoy your life and become who God created you to be. You truly want a positive change in your life. Don't just listen, take action. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you can receive more inspiring messages. Some people die once. The poor die every day. This isn't poetry. It's reality. Poverty doesn't always come with a gravestone or a funeral. It comes with silent suffering, broken dreams, and a life stripped of dignity. You see, poverty is not just the absence of money. It is the slow erosion of hope. It is being invisible in a world where your worth is measured by your wallet. It is the sound of a child crying not for toys, but for food. Poverty is a kind of death, not of the body, but of the soul. Poverty kills dreams before they're... When a child is born into poverty, their world is already painted with limitations. Their dreams are not built in a safe space of imagination, encouragement, or opportunity. Instead, they are forged in an environment where survival is more important than aspiration. A child who grows up in poverty doesn't usually dream of becoming a doctor or an entrepreneur, not because they lack potential, but because they've never been shown it's even possible. From the earliest moments of awareness, they are introduced to hardship rather than hope. In affluent homes, a child might be told you can be anything you want. In a poor home, the message, sometimes unspoken, sometimes directly stated, is you must survive first. That survival mentality becomes a filter through which everything is viewed. A girl with a beautiful voice may never sing beyond the kitchen. A boy with a mind full of numbers may never see the inside of a science lab. Dreams don't die with age. They suffocate in the early years when no one waters them, when no one says, I believe in you, or when no one provides even the most basic resources needed to grow. A child from a poor background quickly learns that society is not built. Their schools are often underfunded, their teachers overburdened, and their homes chaotic or broken. Even if they are bright and full of potential, the lack of support, mentorship, and nourishment can dull their shine. Imagine a young mind sitting in class, hungry, tired from working after school, or emotionally exhausted from watching their parents struggle day after day. That mind may still burn with passion, but it flickers weakly because the fuel it needs, encouragement, rest, stability, is in short supply. Poverty doesn't just rob children of material things. It robs them of belief. It tells them over and over, in subtle and loud ways, you don't belong in that world of success. That's for someone else, not you. It whispers that trying is futile, that dreams are dangerous because they only lead to disappointment. It tells them to play it safe, to think small, to avoid the heartbreak of aiming high and falling. And for many, those whispers become truth. They start to internalize this sense of inferiority, thinking their worth is tied to their circumstances. Even when a poor child dares to dream, the roadblocks are enormous. A lack of access to technology, tutors, extracurricular activities, clean environments, and even stable meals. All these create invisible barriers. Scholarships may exist, but the knowledge of how to apply or the confidence to believe they're worthy often does not. They see others rise, but it feels like those people come from another planet. The steps to success seem too far, too high, and too unrealistic to even begin. This is how poverty kills dreams before they're born. Not with a single blow, but with 1,000 silent cuts. Cuts made by discouragement, neglect, and invisibility. Cuts that say you are less even when they are more than capable. The eyes of potential before it even opens. These children are born with the same brains, the same curiosity, the same spark as anyone else. But that spark is often snuffed out by the cold winds of poverty before it ever gets a chance to ignite. Poverty strips away dignity in ways that are often invisible to those who have never experienced it. It's not just about the lack of money. It's about the loss of control, of pride, of the basic ability to live with your head held high. Dignity is tied to the human need to feel respected, to contribute, to choose. But when poverty enters a person's life, it begins taking these away, one by one, in the most humiliating ways. Imagine a man who once provided for his family with pride now forced to stand in line for hours at a shelter food. Each minute in that line doesn't just mark time. It marks a moment of silent suffering, a moment where self-worth slowly erodes. When someone who has worked hard their whole life is forced to beg for assistance, they don't just lose money, they lose a part of themselves. Poverty doesn't knock at the door with warning. It creeps in quietly and stays loud in the mind, always reminding the person of their failures, real or perceived. A mother skipping meals so her children can eat, pretending she's not hungry, silently suffering. She knows she's doing the right thing, but it chips away at her, not because she minds the sacrifice, but because she knows her children can see her work. She knows they're learning that life is about struggle, not stability. When a person feels like they cannot care for the ones they love, that helplessness turns into shame, and shame is the enemy of dignity. Poverty also brings exposure of pain, exposure of struggle. You can't hide being poor. The torn shoes, the unpaid bills, the electricity being cut off, the stress showing up on your face. People begin to treat you. Service workers become impatient, friends drift away, and even strangers develop silent judgment in their eyes. You start to feel small, even when you know you have the heart of a giant. Your worth becomes tied to your wallet. And because that's empty, people assume your value is too. There is also the mental burden of constantly being in need. When you're poor, every decision becomes critical. Do you buy food or pay rent? Do you skip the medicine or delay the electricity bill again? These choices don't feel like choices. They feel like choices. They feel like and making them over and over again wears a person down. There is no freedom in poverty. It enslaves you to survival, forcing you to focus only on the next day, never the next year. And when you can't plan a future, you stop believing you deserve. Even in systems designed to help, people in poverty often feel humiliated. They have to prove they're struggling enough. They have to explain their pain again and again just to get help. This constant need to validate suffering is dehumanizing. It tells them their word isn't enough, their struggle isn't believed, and their reality must be verified. They become case numbers, not people. When society treats poverty as a moral failure instead of a systemic issue, the poor are made to feel guilty for being poor. That guilt is toxic. It eats away at a person's spirit until they start believing they are the problem. They no longer walk with confidence, no longer speak with strength. They look down, speak less, avoid eye contact, not because they are weak, but because they are exhausted from carrying the weight of judgment. What is dignity if not the ability to feel seen, respected, and valued, regardless of your bank balance? Poverty doesn't take away your soul, but it makes you feel like your soul doesn't matter. It forces you to live in survival mode, and when you live in survival mode long enough, you forget what it means to simply be human without apology. Poverty is often measured in economic terms: lack of income, absence of resources, limited access to necessities. But the deeper wound poverty inflicts is emotional. It doesn't just affect the bank account. It attacks the heart, the mind, and the soul. The emotional weight of poverty is heavier than the physical hunger it causes. It lingers quietly, shaping how people see themselves, how they relate to others, and how they perceive the world. People talk about poverty in terms of money, but rarely do they acknowledge the psychological toll it takes on those who live within its grip. Living in poverty creates a constant state of anxiety, when every day is a question mark. Will I eat today? Can I pay the rent? Will the electricity be cut off again? The mind is in a permanent state of fight or flight or flight. That kind of stress doesn't just affect the body. It affects decision-making, relationships, and self-worth. People in poverty often live with a background noise of worry that never stops. It's like a buzzing that dulls joy and amplifies fear. It becomes harder to concentrate, harder to plan, harder to hope. Every ounce of energy goes toward survival, and emotional well-being is pushed aside because there's simply no room for it. There's also the emotional pain of watching loved ones suffer. A parent in poverty doesn't just feel their own hunger. They feel the child's hunger 10 times more. They don't just experience cold. They worry about whether their kids will sleep through the night without a blanket. The guilt, the helplessness, the feeling of failing those you love, these are emotional scars that money alone can't erase. Even when they do their absolute best, people in poverty often feel that their best is never enough, and that emotional burden can be crushing. Shame is another companion of poverty. Society often treats the poor as if they've done something wrong. They are blamed for their condition, judged for needing help, and made to feel like second-class citizens. Judgment is internalized. It becomes a voice in the back of the mind saying, "Or not good enough, or you'll never get out." Even small interactions, being looked down on at the grocery store, being ignored in a job interview, being talked over in a public place, add up. The poor begin to feel invisible. They learn to shrink themselves, to apologize for their presence, to expect less from life. Depression and hopelessness are common in the lives of those who struggle with poverty, but they are rarely acknowledged. The emotional weight becomes part of everyday life. When dreams are deferred long enough, people stop dreaming. When the future feels like a locked door, people stop trying to knock. The emotional consequence of poverty is not just sadness. It's numbness. People begin to detach from their own potential, from their own sense of identity, because they have been told in subtle and loud ways that they don't matter. Loneliness is another invisible wound. Poverty isolates. It creates distance between friends, family, and community. Invitations are turned down not because people don't want to connect, but because they can't afford to. Social gatherings, celebrations, even basic communication become painful reminders of what they lack. Over time, this isolation becomes a wall that separates them not just from society, but from their own sense of belonging. They stop reaching out. They stop speaking up. They stop believing that anyone would want to listen.
The emotional side of poverty is what makes it so dangerous.
It doesn't just limit what people have, it limits what they believe they deserve. It doesn't just create external barriers, it builds internal ones that are harder to see and even harder to break. Poverty becomes not just a financial crisis, but an emotional prison. The pain is deep, constant, and unseen by the world that judges more than it understands. Society often blames the victim when it comes to poverty. Instead of asking why systems have failed, people instinctively turn to judgment. They look at someone who is poor and assume laziness, irresponsibility, or lack of ambition. They ask, why don't they just work harder? Or why did they make such bad choices? As if poverty is always the result of personal failure. This is not only cruel, it is deeply flawed. It ignores the complex web of circumstances, injustice, and generational struggle that often traps people in poverty. When society chooses to blame the individual rather than examine the system, it adds another layer of suffering to those who are already fighting just to survive. The blame begins early. A child who struggles in school because they're hungry is labeled as lazy. A teenager who skips classes to help support their family is called a dropout. A single mother working 2 jobs and still unable to afford rent is seen as irresponsible. People rarely stop to ask what led to those circumstances. They don't see the food insecurity, the lack of access to health care, the unstable housing, the trauma, or the broken systems. Instead, they see the surface and write a story of failure without ever looking underneath. This blame is often supported by media and public discourse that paints poverty as a moral failing. The poor are depicted as dependent, as burdens, as people who exploit the system. This narrative becomes so common that even the poor begin to internalize it. They start to believe that their suffering is their fault, that they should be ashamed, that they are somehow less than. This internalized blame becomes a silent enemy, chipping away at self-worth and confidence. It convinces people to suffer quietly rather than seek help, because asking for support feels like admitting defeat. When society blames the victim, it conveniently absolves itself from responsibility. It doesn't have to fix broken schools or provide affordable housing or ensure fair wages. If poverty is the poor person's fault, then there's no need for systemic change. This is not just unfair, it is dangerous. It keeps the cycle of poverty alive by ignoring the real issues and targeting the individuals caught in them. It creates a culture where compassion is replaced with criticism and where helping others is seen as optional rather than essential. Even well-meaning people can fall into this trap. They offer advice instead of understanding, solutions instead of support. They say things like, if I did it, why can't you? Without recognizing the differences in background, opportunity, and privilege. They fail to see that not everyone starts at the same place in life, and not everyone is given the same tools. Success is not simply a matter of willpower. It often depends on access, environment, and timing. Blaming the victim ignores these truths and reduces poverty to a matter of personal choice. This blame also creates division. It fosters an us versus them mentality, where the poor are seen as separate, as other as people who don't belong. This division makes it easier to overlook their pain, to pass by their suffering, to write off their humanity. It dehumanizes them and makes it harder for real connection or empathy to take root. It builds walls instead of bridges and reinforces the idea that some lives are worth more than others. When people are blamed for their poverty, they are robbed not only of dignity but also of the chance to rise. They are forced to fight not only against their circumstances but also against the weight of societal judgment. They must prove their worth in a world that has already made up its mind about them. This blame doesn't just hurt, isolation makes it even harder. Tuition makes it even harder to escape. In blaming the victim, society guarantees that the cycle continues generation after generation because it refuses to face its own role in the problem. Poverty is a cycle, not a choice. It's easy to stand on the outside and think that escaping poverty is just a matter of working harder, making better decisions, or being more disciplined. But that kind of thinking is built on a misunderstanding of how poverty works. Poverty is not a single bad decision nor a moment of weakness. It is a system, a trap, a web of barriers that are deeply rooted and often invisible to those who have never lived it. People don't choose to be poor. In most cases, they are born into a world where the odds are already stacked against them, and climbing out requires far more than personal willpower. The cycle begins early. A child born into poverty doesn't start at the same line as others. They may not have access to quality education, nutritious food, safe neighborhoods, or stable housing. Their parents may be working multiple jobs and still unable to make ends meet. That child grows up watching struggle, absorbing stress, and living with the constant pressure of survival. Education, often seen as a way out, becomes another challenge when schools are underfunded, teachers are overworked, and resources are limited. Without strong support and guidance, even the most capable children can fall behind. Not because they're lazy, but because they're tired, hungry, or dealing with adult problems long before they should. As that child grows into adulthood, the challenges compound. Without higher education or strong job opportunities, they enter a workforce that offers low pay and no security. Minimum wage jobs don't cover basic living expenses, and many are forced to work long hours with no benefits. They may live paycheck to paycheck, one emergency away from falling deeper into debt. And even if they want to go back to school or learn new skills, they often can't afford to take time off work or pay for training. The idea of just getting a better job ignores the reality that good jobs often require qualifications and access that they were never given a fair chance to obtain. Debt becomes another part of the cycle. Many poor families rely on credit cards, payday loans, or informal borrowing just to meet daily needs. These debts grow quickly, with high interest rates and hidden fees, trapping people in a system where they're always paying but never getting ahead. Health problems, accidents, or family crises can push them further down, and without insurance or savings, one setback becomes a disaster. The emotional toll of constantly trying and failing to move forward wears people down until hope itself begins to fade. What makes the cycle even more powerful is that it often spans generations. A child raised in poverty is more likely to become an adult living in poverty. They inherit not just financial hardship, but also limited access to networks, mentors, or systems that could help them rise. They are taught directly or indirectly to lower their expectations. Over time, poverty becomes normalized, even internalized. It becomes not just a financial condition, but a mindset shaped by years of being told that this is your fault. Escaping poverty isn't impossible, but it is incredibly difficult. It requires not only personal effort, but systemic change, fair wages, equal education, affordable health care, and strong community support. When society fails to provide these, it allows the cycle to continue and then turns around to blame the people caught in it. This is why calling poverty a choice is not only incorrect, it's unjust. It ignores the facts, dismisses the struggle, and prevents real solutions from being pursued. To break the cycle, we must first stop pretending it's a choice. We must recognize that poverty is maintained by inequality, discrimination, and broken systems, not by laziness or lack of ambition. Real change begins when we shift our focus from blaming the individual to transforming the structures that keep them trapped. Only then can we begin to unlock doors that have been shut for far too long. The way out of poverty isn't charity, it's change. And that change begins with empathy, education, and empowerment. These are not buzzwords. They are the building blocks of transformation. When we stop looking at poverty through the lens of statistics and start seeing it through the eyes of those who endure it daily, everything shifts. Empathy allows us to feel with people instead of judging them. Education gives them the tools to unlock doors that have been shut for generations. Empowerment helps them believe they have the strength to walk through those doors and change their lives. Poverty may be a trap, but it's not a life sentence. When these three forces are put into motion, change becomes possible. Empathy is the first step. It doesn't mean feeling sorry for people. It means trying to understand what it's like to wake up every day and wonder if you'll have enough to eat. It means listening to the stories of those who have been overlooked and unheard. Empathy creates connection. It removes the walls that divide us from them. When people in power begin to feel the weight of poverty not as a policy problem, but as a human one, they begin to respond differently. They advocate with heart. They legislate with purpose. They create systems that heal instead of harm. Empathy isn't weakness. It's the strongest force for justice. Education is the next step, and not just formal education, but practical, accessible, and relevant learning that gives people real options. A quality education opens doors, raises confidence, and expands what a person believes is possible for themselves. But for those trapped in poverty, education often feels like a luxury. Schools in poor areas are underfunded and overcrowded. Many students face trauma, hunger, or responsibilities at home that make learning difficult. Changing this requires more than funding. It requires reimagining education itself. It means making schools safe havens, equipping teachers with the tools to inspire, and ensuring that no child is left behind because of where they were born. For adults, it means offering flexible learning, vocational training, and pathways to careers that provide stability, not just survival. Empowerment is what ties it all together. It is the belief that no matter how hard the past has been, the future can still be different. Empowerment comes from being heard, from having choices, and from being given not just a handout, but a hand up. It means giving people access to resources, opportunities, and support systems that help them stand on their own. This could be affordable childcare so parents can work or go to school, mental health services to help heal trauma, or mentorship programs that guide people toward their goals. Empowerment doesn't just lift individuals, it uplifts communities. When one person rises, they bring others with them. They become leaders, role models, and proof that change is possible. Empathy, education, and empowerment are not separate ideas. They are deeply connected. You can't educate someone effectively if you don't understand their struggles. You can't empower someone if they don't believe you truly care. And you can't create lasting change unless all three are working together. These are not quick fix. They require patience, investment, and a willingness to see value in every human life. But they work. Stories from around the world show that when people are given the tools to succeed and the support to believe they can, lives are transformed. The cycle of poverty is strong, but it is not stronger than the human spirit. With empathy, we connect. With education, we equip. With empowerment, we ignite. These are not just ideals. They are strategies for liberation. They are how we begin to dismantle the systems that keep people down and build a future where everyone has a fair chance to rise. The way out of poverty isn't easy, but it's possible. And it begins when we choose to walk beside those who are struggling, not in front of them. Poverty may wear the face of hunger, cold, or homelessness, but its deepest scars are often invisible. It kills potential before it's born, steals dignity, breaks spirits, and builds walls between people and their dreams. It is not just the absence of money, it is the presence of despair. But if we are willing to look beyond the numbers, beyond the stereotypes, we begin to see the truth. Poverty is a human issue, and it demands a human response. We cannot afford to keep blaming the victims or pretending it's someone else's problem. Real change will take courage. Courage to care, to act, to rebuild systems that include instead of exclude. It will take listening to those who have lived it, investing in minds and hearts, and committing to a future where no one is trapped simply because of where they were born. The way forward is not paved with pity, but with purpose. Every life has value. Every voice deserves to be heard. And every person, regardless of their beginning, should have the chance to rise. Let us be the generation that doesn't turn away, but leans in with compassion, vision, and resolve. Because poverty should never be a life sentence, and together we can break the cycle. If this message touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and spread the hope. Subscribe now for more powerful stories that inspire change and ignite action.